Hey there, welcome to First Five. If you're looking for encouragement, you came to the right place. Let's dive in. Okay, so this week we're going to take a deep look into Luke 24. Now, we're not too far removed from Easter, and I think there's something we can learn together about the state of our hearts toward a risen Christ. But let me start by asking you this question. Is your check engine light on? Be honest. Tell the truth. Shame the devil, okay? Because mine definitely is. Like, I need an oil change and some more stuff. And when that light pops on, like, you already know what it is. We got to take our cars to the mechanic so they can do the whole thing. Like, and they really do what they call a diagnostic test on our cars. Now, this just gives them an opportunity to look through all the major components, all the things that make up our car to make sure that the whole thing is working together properly. Like, they ask a series of questions to you and then check many areas of the vehicle to assess whether or not it's operating at maximum and full capacity. Well, honestly, if we're being real honest, our hearts need that too. Like, we need a diagnostic test every once in a while as well. And our hearts can get so overwhelmed with the ways of this world that we forget to stop and focus our attention on the way and the truth and the life, which is Jesus. So all this week, we're actually going to be taking a look at Luke 24 and asking some key diagnostic questions, right, of the text, but also of our souls. Now, here's my disclaimer to you, all right? I got to put this out there. You're going to have a lot more questions than you do answers at the end of this, right? And that's a good thing, because you can sort those things out with God. I truly believe that processing through Luke 24 this week will give us the heart check that we need, okay? So let's start off with some context. Jesus has been crucified at this point, right? And so Luke 24 should start with a bit of a solemn tone. I mean, after all, Jesus' best friends and all his family just saw him be killed and buried. They experienced that together. And so it should be a solemn tone that's here, but really instead there's this overtone of hope that marks the beginning of this chapter. Now, Jesus had already predicted his resurrection and given his disciples that hope a few times. To hear it is one thing, though. To actually see it come to pass and experience it is a completely different thing. So here's what happened. Some female followers of Jesus are taking spices to the tomb to anoint the body of Jesus, and then they show up and there is no Jesus to be found. I mean, angels appear to confirm that Jesus is not there. He not here, dog. Why are you looking for the living among the dead? Okay. And he reminds them, or the angels remind them of the words about Jesus, like what Jesus has said about his own resurrection. And they rush back to share the news with the rest of the disciples, but they don't believe them. They don't believe the women that tell them that. And that's important. We'll come back to it in just a moment. But in this account, I think it's really interesting that Luke singles out Peter, like a disciple of Jesus, right? He singles out Peter for having enough curiosity to actually believe the testimony of the women, to go to the tomb to check to see if Jesus' body is actually there. And when he gets there, obviously, he sees that the strips of linen that Christ was wrapped in are lying by themselves, and he's not there. And yet he still wonders to himself what has happened. That's what the word says. Now, all of this leads us to the moment when the disciples get an opportunity to interact with the risen Christ, with Jesus. But there's one big problem, and that's where we'll pick up. Luke 24, looking at verses 13 to 18, it says, "Now, that same day, two of them were going to a village called Emmaus, about 7 miles from Jerusalem. They were talking with each other about everything that had happened. As they talked and discussed these things with each other, Jesus himself came up and walked along with them." But catch this, but they were kept from recognizing him. He asked them, "What are you discussing together as you walk along?" They stood still, their faces downcast. One of them, named Cleopas, asked him, "Are you the only one visiting Jerusalem who does not know the things that have happened there in these days?" Isn't that fascinating? They was walking with him, they didn't recognize him. And so that actually leads me to my first diagnostic question that you can just ask your own heart. Like, what are the things in your life keeping you from recognizing Jesus? Could it be your perception of him that is keeping you from recognizing him? I mean, it's one thing for Jesus to be with you. He's always with you, but it's another thing for you to recognize him for who he truly is, to see him rightly. So what are the things in your life that are keeping you from seeing Jesus rightly? Is it your doubt or your skepticism? We'll actually talk more about that in the next episode. Is it the state of your present circumstances, the difficulty of your life? Like, take a moment and just diagnose those things real quick. Like, what are the things in your life keeping you from recognizing Jesus? And then I want you to take some time and offer those things to him. How's that sound? Yeah? Okay, let's keep reading because it gets more interesting from here. Luke 24, verses 19 to 21. This is Jesus talking. He says, "What things?" he asked. About Jesus in Nazareth, they replied. "He was a prophet, powerful in word and deed before God and all the people. The chief priests and our rulers handed him over to be sentenced to death, and they crucified him. But we had hoped that he was the one who was going to redeem Israel. And what is more, it is the third day since all this took place." And so that leads me to my next diagnostic question for your own soul. In what areas have your hopes been dashed? I mean, there was so much doubt in the disciples, man. Like they had hoped that Jesus was who he said he was. But when he died and the third day rolled around and they hadn't heard from him, doubt began to creep in. Like their hopes had been dashed. Quite possibly, they began to believe another truth instead of the truth that proceeded from the mouth of Jesus, what Jesus actually told them. So let me ask you again, in what areas have your hopes been dashed? Like, is it in your marriage or your relationship? Everything was doing just fine, and then all of a sudden it just took a horrible turn, and the relationship is just not what you thought it would be. Maybe it's in your finances or your community. Like you're just struggling to make ends meet, right? To rub two pennies together and the bills are just piling up before you. Or maybe you're just trying your hardest not to isolate yourself. Like everything in your life is pushing you into isolation and you want community, but no one seems to understand you or want to go deep in relationship with you. Like, have your hopes been dashed in your ability to have a child? You keep praying and trying and praying and trying, but it's just not happening. Like maybe you're wanting to finish school on time, but you just don't have the grades. You have no idea what your future looks like. In what area have your hopes been dashed? Take a moment, several moments, diagnose that. And then can I encourage you with this? Can I give you permission to do something with those dashed hopes? It's simple, but here it is. Hope again. Like, go to Jesus in prayer and he will give you hope. He'll give it to you because he is hope, and hope will not be put to shame. Jesus will never be put to shame. What have you believed in place of the truth in your life? Like, in what areas have your hopes been dashed? Process through that today with the Lord, and then be encouraged that God sees your check engine light. He sees that there's some things in your heart that need to be fixed so that you can operate at maximum and full capacity. And listen, God is here to help diagnose. He's the master mechanic. He's here to help you diagnose those things so that he can restore you back to a full functioning lover of him. I really hope that encouraged you today. And I hope that it sparked some self-reflection as well. We'll talk soon.